Hey, this is Allison Liu, Public Health 100 professor, and I'm going to go over the study guide with you in preparation for your exam. The exam, like the other assignments, is open book, open resources. This study guide will help you really prepare for it, know where things are when you're taking the exam, and just give you a lot more information about some of the questions. Okay, so let's start with the study guide. It's under resources, and also this video is in assignments. So this is the first question. People with this substance abuse disorder tend to have nutritional deficiencies, especially if they are not eating well. So if you look into the test bank up here, you can see that there's lots of different choices. The only one that's really a substance abuse disorder is alcoholism, which is right here. So that is the answer for this question. Okay. It's not going to let me do that. There we go. There we go. So that one's alcoholism. Okay, number 2. Women need to make sure they get enough, or they get blank. This says a vitamin under here. And blank, a mineral. To try to prevent anemia that can be caused by bleeding during menstrual cycles. So this is 2 different blanks. We're going to have 2 different answers from up here in the bank. So, let's see what we can find. A vitamin that's related to anemia. So the answer to that is going to be vitamin C, and the mineral is going to be iron, because we know that iron is involved with hemoglobin, making sure it can carry oxygen, and now that is involved with anemia. Okay, so that's the answer. Iron is the mineral, and the vitamin is vitamin C, and that's because vitamin C is the one that allows iron to be absorbed properly. It's the vitamin most associated with anemia and iron absorption. So let's see where that one is. Vitamin C. Should be on here somewhere. I hope there's not a mistake on my study guide. That would be bad. I don't see vitamin C, but that is the answer. So we're going to go ahead and type it in here. If we don't find it, I'll make an announcement to the class so that everyone will know. Okay, so next we have, when pregnant women get enough of this vitamin, it prevents neural tube defects in their babies. So the answer to that is folate or folic acid. Oops. We're going to go ahead and choose that one. And that neural tube defects include things like spina bifida. And we also know that the government started supplementing our grain products with folic acid in the late 1990s. And that was in order to help make sure that we were getting enough of this folate in the pregnant women's diets. This group is very high risk for bone loss. So what of the people up here are very high risk for bone loss? Okay, well, the answer is going to be women at menopause, because they're really high risk for bone loss. Okay, so women at menopause is the answer here. So during that transition, right after that transition, especially, you're going to lose a lot of bone mass. And we can try to prevent that some, but, it's sort of a consequence of that time in life. We can minimize it, but we can't really stop it completely. This fat is very unhealthy, and we should try to avoid eating it as much as we can. So which fat is it that we talked about was so unhealthy that we didn't want to eat any more than we absolutely had to? That was trans fats, okay? So trans fats is the one that we don't want in our diet any more than necessary. That's like the hydrogenated oils because they are associated with coronary artery disease. And since that's the #1 killer of Americans, we don't want to have any of that in our diet if we can avoid it. Okay. This food program helps low-income families get enough food for their babies and young children. Okay, now there are several food programs in this list, and they are for different groups of people. But the one that helps with babies and young children is women, infants, and children. It also helps pregnant women, which isn't listed in the question, but that is also true. So that's WIC, women, infants, and children. So that's the answer there. So we'll mark out WIC as a choice. Okay. This food program helps the elderly get enough food. So which program was only associated with the elderly and not others? That was Meals on Wheels. So we're going to take that and use that as our answer for this program helps the elderly. And remember, Meals on Wheels helps people with isolation as well as making sure they have food. Because the people that deliver the meals come to the home of the recipient of the Meals on Wheels program. Okay, and then we have the food program that helps low-income people get enough food. And this can be low-income people of various ages. So low-income people getting enough food, that's SNAP. It used to be called food stamps. Okay, so that's the SNAP program. We'll mark that one also as used. Okay, the good cholesterol is called what? And you want it to be high. So which is the good cholesterol? That's the HDL cholesterol. We're going to copy that. Put it down in our answer. And which one is the bad cholesterol? The bad cholesterol is LDL. You want it to be low. Okay. And then we have this macronutrient helps blood clot properly and is given by injection to newborns. So the one that we talked about that's given by injection to newborns is actually vitamin K. And it helps our blood clot. And the reason we have to give it to newborns is they don't really have any. So we have to make sure to give them some. They will have some later, but at birth they really don't. Okay, so babies. Okay, so babies that are totally breastfed usually need supplementation of this micronutrient by about 6 months of age. And supplementation is usually vitamin drops or fortified cereal. Okay, so that's going to be iron. And that's because the mother really can't keep up with making sure the baby is getting enough iron. And their iron stores are exhausted. So water is supplemented with this micronutrient to help keep teeth healthy. Which micronutrient was associated with keeping teeth healthy? That's fluoride. Okay. Okay, these two diseases are associated with diets extremely low in micronutrients. That's marasmus and kwashiorkor, which is next to marasmus on this word bank. Those are the two starvation diseases we talked about. So those are the answers to that question. And then Kwashiorkor. Okay, which of the eating disorders is most associated with a very restrictive eating habits, body dysmorphia, weight loss, and relatively high mortality? Okay, so that one's going to be anorexia nervosa. Okay, so the question's going to list some other eating disorders, but the key to knowing that it's anorexia nervosa is because it lists very restrictive eating habits and weight loss, because anorexia nervosa is the one that causes weight loss and the restrictive eating pattern. Bulimia involves self-induced vomiting, and the others just are correct. Okay, so we often we often associate milk and orange juice with this vitamin. Our bodies also can make it when we are exposed to sunlight. Okay, so the answer to that one's going to be vitamin D, because our bodies can make that, and we get it from calcium. And often orange juice also has vitamin D in it when it's fortified with calcium. Okay, the prefix hyper means, the answer to that is high. Hyper means high. Okay, morbidity. Okay, there's morbidity and mortality. So morbidity is illness and mortality is death. So morbidity is going to be poor health and illness. When it asks what morbidity is, that's the answer. If it asks what mortality is, then that means death. What agencies regulate foods and drugs in the United States? We talked about those a lot, the different agencies, and the one that regulates foods and drugs is the FDA. And we're going to put that as our answer. At what stage of development are we most likely to be very picky eaters? Okay, that's going to be the toddler years. Toddlers are very picky eaters. Of course, there's some individual variation, but by and large, toddlers are the picky eaters, most picky. Okay, so this is a blood protein. That blood protein is called albumin. We'll look here for albumin. There it is. What is the best resource for research on a topic for an important class assignment? Okay, so this question is asking you what's the best resource for research. So when we were learning to cite articles on that last assignment, the best ones we could cite were things that were from peer-reviewed scientific journals. So that's the best. Now, it's not like you couldn't choose a book that's like a textbook or a website that was a good source of information, but the best resource is going to be peer-reviewed journals. When it comes to supplements, remember blank. Most of our nutrients need to come from our food and not supplements. So that's called food first. We want to get our nutrients from food before we get them from other things like supplements. Food first. Sometimes supplement makers put claims on labels that are blank or even blank. So the answer to that is going to be fraudulent, well, unfounded and fraudulent. So first unfounded, and then sometimes even fraudulent. Okay, in the past, most people were mostly concerned about getting blank food. People also were more blank because they had to be to survive. So in the past, what were people most concerned about? They were concerned about getting too little food. And that's still an issue for many today. But it's they were also more active because they had to be to survive, okay? The answer there is active. So they were, in the past, they were concerned mostly with getting too little food, and they had to be more active in order to survive. Today, more people have enough food, and they're less active compared to in the past. This diet is especially good for managing high blood pressure or hypertension. So which diet is that? That's the DASH diet. The DASH diet down here. Today, most adults die of what disease? The answer there is going to be heart disease. There's only one food appropriate for newborns that are not breastfed, and that is what? It's going to be infant formula, or sometimes you see commercially manufactured infant formula to be even more specific. It's going to be infant formula because we can't feed babies cow's milk and things like that from the store. That's not altered because that's not safe for babies. Having a little problems with my putting that in the answer. We'll just put it right here. Oh, I can't win. Then we have how often do newborns eat? How often do newborns eat? We actually had this question on a quiz, I think, earlier in the course. They eat about every 4 hours, day and night. It can vary a little bit from one baby to another. They eat very frequently, about that frequency. And then they gradually space out their feedings as they get older. At what stage in life do most humans grow the fastest? What's the stage in life when we grow the fastest? It's actually already used, so I'm going to mark that out. It is actually, I can find the answer. Infancy. Here's the answer. So hyponatremia means low what? Hyponatremia is low sodium. We gotta find sodium in our list. So on the actual exam, questions like this will be multiple choice. So it'll say, hyponatremia means low what? And it'll actually give you a list of different electrolytes and things. Hyperkalemia is high what? That's potassium. Those are important to know, especially if you ever intend to be in healthcare as a career. Because as we know, the body tightly regulates sodium and potassium, among other things. All right, foods very high in simple sugars have a high what? They have a high glycemic index. The glycemic index is where on here? There it is. Okay, and then blank, which are macronutrients, are sometimes called building blocks. Well, sometimes the amino acids are called building blocks, and sometimes proteins are called building blocks because amino acids actually make up proteins. So I've actually heard that both ways, that they'll say, oh, the proteins are building blocks, or the amino acids are building blocks of proteins. So it's always associated with proteins, though. Both of those are associated with proteins, either the proteins themselves or what makes them up, which is the building blocks called amino acids. Okay, so it looks like that vitamin C is not in our, I think this is supposed to say vitamin C. So I'll have to tell the rest of our class that one of the word bank options wasn't correct. So we'll let them know. And then let's go down here and look at the tips for studying, and so we can go over those real quick. So review common problems when starting breastfeeding. So when starting breastfeeding, there's several common problems that can happen. There's two I want to mention. And two I want to mention are sore nipples. So the nipples of the breast can get sore, and that actually is more common in women with lighter skin tones than in women with darker skin tones. I don't think anybody knows why. It must have something to do with the melanin in the skin, but they tend to have sore nipples when they first start breastfeeding. The other one is engorged breasts, which is too much milk. So the breasts make milk based on how much the baby is eating. When the breasts are emptied of milk, the hormone cascade that happens related to the letdown and the milk being removed from the breast through suckling actually causes the body to signal the production of more milk. Okay, and so that process takes a little bit of time to get right. And so initially, when women start to breastfeed, they can have too much milk for the baby. The body's overcompensating and saying, we need lots of milk. And then eventually this whole negative feedback loop will make the body make the right amount, okay, of milk. So you can have engorged breasts, which is too much milk, sore nipples. There are some other problems, but those are the two that I want you to know for this exam. And then what are the macronutrients? We know that those are protein, fats, carbohydrates, alcohol, and water. It's also sometimes listed as a macronutrient. Then know the modifiable or changeable and non-modifiable or non-changeable risk factors for heart disease. So those are actually located on a slide at the end of lecture number 5, which is on lipids. Know what is part of the Mediterranean diet. So go to your slides and look at the different look at the Mediterranean diet slide, or you can find that on the internet if you prefer. But look at the Mediterranean diet and look at what it entails, what you're supposed to eat on the Mediterranean diet, know where to find that. And then know which fat distribution pattern is associated with lower rates of chronic disease. So the answer to that is going to be the pear shape, not the apple shape. The apple shape is the one that's associated with higher rates of chronic disease. And then know what trans fats are and why manufacturers might want to use them in their food products, even though they are very unhealthy. So trans fats are those hydrogenated oils that are not very good for us at all. And we started using them in products that needed to have a long shelf life. And so we could make a product, put it on the shelves like a cracker or something like that. And if we used hydrogenated oils, it would last much, much longer. And so that's how we got started using these trans fats in our food products. And that wasn't so good for our heart health because they're very bad for our heart. So now we try to minimize the trans fats in our diets. So what are micronutrients? So the micronutrients are all those vitamins and minerals that we learned about. It's important to know where in your text or where in your slides that you can find information about micronutrients, because you may have some questions about micronutrients and what they do or deficiencies in them, what they will cause and things like that. So you want to know where to look for those so your test won't take as long when you're looking up answers. Know the characteristics of type 1 and type 2 diabetes because they are different. Remember, we talked about type 1 diabetes usually occurs in younger people. They don't make any insulin. They're just cells that make insulin have been destroyed by an autoimmune process, and they need insulin to survive. Type 2 diabetics are insulin resistant. They're more likely to be older, more likely to have obesity problems, and they are resistant to insulin, so their body can't use the insulin to break down the sugars properly. They usually take oral medication, but sometimes they do need insulin medication by injection as well. And know how diabetics can prevent complication of diabetes. So there was a large study, it's been a while now, that looked at whether or not it did any good to tightly control diabetes, to keep the blood sugar as normal as possible. So what they found was, yes, when we tightly control blood sugar, when we make it so that we're controlling the blood sugar as if we didn't have diabetes, as if a person didn't have diabetes, when you do that, you do have better outcomes and reduced risk of complications. So how can diabetics do that? They can eat a diabetic diet. They can make sure that they're taking the right amount of insulin for what they're eating. They can do things like carb counting to do that. They could use an insulin pump, but basically they need to tightly control their blood sugar. I know about breastfeeding. There was a lot of information about breastfeeding in that one course we had about babies. So know about that, know where that information is found so that you can use it to answer questions if necessary. And know where to look in your textbook or slides to find out more about the various vitamins and minerals. Those are the micronutrients. You want to know where that information is found, so it just doesn't take as long to take your test if you need to look something up. Let's see. The body tightly controls blood calcium, blood glucose, and blood potassium. So know that, among other things, but these are three things that are very important that are tightly controlled. The body doesn't let them get outside of a pretty tight range, and it has mechanisms in place. Remember, we talked about glucose and the mechanisms in place to control that. Also calcium, the mechanisms in place to control that. And that's one way we can lose bone if we're not eating calcium, because our body will just take it from our bones, right? And to bring up the blood calcium if it needs to. And blood potassium, we talked about that in dehydration, that if people are vomiting, they can end up losing potassium and they're not really able to replace it, and they can get low potassium, which is one reason you do things like electrolyte drinks to try to replace that potassium if possible. Okay, so that's it. That's all the answers I have for you for this. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I'll be happy to answer those. You can email me, and I will answer you. The test is going to open on Wednesday, and it will actually close on Saturday, I believe. So be sure and take the exam. You know, don't not take it. Don't forget to take it. You got lots of days to take it, so just be sure and really do it. And good luck on it. And if you have any questions before the exam, please let me know. Thanks so much. It's been a good class.